tradition. I started with the incumbent.
Okay, we should be okay.
On Tuesday, so we'll start with him first.
Sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Scott. I'm one of the editors here at The Sun. I'm the enterprise editor. I'd like to thank you for tuning in today for our continuing series of Sun-sponsored debates featuring candidates for state rep and state senate. Today's debate is for the 2nd Middlesex state representative seat, featuring Jim Arciero. He's the incumbent. He's a Democrat. He's to my left, your right. He's seeking his 3rd term in the state legislature. And to my right, your left, is Valerie Wormell. She's a Westford selectman. She's lived in Westford for about 21 years. She's serving in her 3rd term as a Westford selectman, and she's a Republican. So I'd like to thank both of you for coming tonight. I appreciate it, and we'll have a nice hour. It will pass quickly, I'm sure. So I'll just open it up with just a couple questions, and it's going to be informal, and you'll both basically have about a minute to respond, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, okay?
All right, sounds good.
So, Valerie, I'd like to begin with you. You're the challenger in this race. I'd like you to assess Jim's performance as a state representative as he seeks another term, how you think he's done, and in what areas do you think he could improve upon?
Well, a lot of people know I go door to door, so I get to speak to a lot of residents, and there is one word that seems to come up quite a bit, and that's disappointing. They're a little disappointed with your performance so far. And so I looked at the legislation that you've co-sponsored and sponsored just to see what people were talking about. And there's nothing that you can point to in particular, but I think everyone is very disappointed, first of all, with the federal government. So that's something I don't think that you can overcome. But I think we're all frustrated with the lack of local aid.
Okay, Jim, your response to that?
Sure. Well, I just want to first thank the Little Sun for having this spirited debate. It seems to have started spiritedly. I appreciate having this discussion on the issues. Just to respond to that quickly, I've worked really hard since I've been elected in 2008 to work across the aisle, be bipartisan. I've always supported good ideas regardless of the party. It's unfortunate that my opponent will say that she's talked to people that were disappointed. I think there's always a frustration in government, but I've knocked on doors too, almost 2,000 so far, and I've worked really, really hard to be open and accessible. And I haven't heard the same kinds of things that my opponent says that she has heard, but I heard frustration in government. But I'm very optimistic about our district in terms of growing jobs, in terms of local aid. It's been a very difficult economic situation we've all been in, but clearly things are getting better. Unemployment in Massachusetts are 6.4%. But let's talk a little bit about jobs here in the 2nd Middlesex district, Chelmsford, Littleton, and Westford. We've actually continued to buck the trend, Chris. We have retained thousands of jobs from Chelmsford through Westford, from Littleton through Westford to Chelmsford, and grown almost 1,000 jobs. I'm really proud of my record. I'm really proud of the public and private partnerships that we've had. And when it comes to reform, as a freshman, I started to sort of buck leadership and buck the House Democrats with pension reform, EBT reform, transportation reform. I'm proud of my record, and I think I've done a good job.
I'd like to come back to that.
Sure.
I'd like to come back to jobs too. I'd just like to stay on local aid for a minute. Valerie, could you please be a little bit more specific? What are the folks of Chelmsford, Westford, and Littleton saying about the incumbent and local aid? Because there's been a lot of local aid is one of those political footballs that gets tossed up there, every year. So tell me specifically what you're hearing in that regard, and what specifically they're disappointed in.
Well, local aid to the towns have been on the decline the last 3 years, and so in order to make up those shortfalls, we have to balance the municipal budgets on the backs of taxpayers. So we're seeing a decrease in services as a result of what we need to take to fund our school systems. And all 3 communities are very, very proud of their school systems. They're excellent. And the greatest frustration is, in order to make it up, the schools are assessing more and more fees on parents, and they're finding it very difficult. They've already paid their taxes, and then to have to be assessed these fees on top of things, they're frustrated.
Okay. I don't know the local aid numbers for these three communities.
Sure.
Jim, could you address that specifically?
Absolutely.
How has local aid done in
Well, let's
Chelmsford,
just say,
Worcester, and those three?
let's just start off by saying that, you know, I was elected and sworn in the worst economic situation in 75 years. So let's start off with that. Increasing local aid became to protecting local aid when we moved forward in the first 3.5 years. This past budget, we were able to increase local aid on Chapter 70 by $180 million, almost $4 billion statewide, increasing in local aid. That's number one. Number two, let's look towards something about unfunded mandates. The Chelmsford School Committee came in to meet with myself and Senator Fargo at the time, and as well as the Chelmsford delegation to talk about an unfunded mandate. One of those was called, it was school transportation for homeless individuals. There were people that needed to, you know, obviously by mandates of the schools, get to and from school through school transportation. This cost for Chelmsford alone was $40,000. Statewide was $11 million. We got that language into the budget, and now that's a new line item coming up in this next budget, and that's addressed for the towns statewide, 351 cities and towns, and addressing a need for the town of Chelmsford that they came to us with. Moreover, we were also able to increase regional school transportation the last 2 years. And so we're moving in the right direction. Make no bones about it. I know there's frustration that local aid, you know, when there's 2/3 of the $32 billion budget is obligatory spending, Chris. Everything else, local aid, public safety, human services, everybody's taking cuts, everybody's taking a hit. We're moving in the right direction, and I'm proud that we've increased local aid this year.
Okay, Jim, I'd like to ask you, one of the ways that a community like Westford and Littleton in particular can offset, you know, the kind of helter-skelter nature of local aid is with development and local receipts.
Please.
We were talking earlier on camera about development in Westford.
Yes.
The development in Westford is really quite remarkable when you look at that Route 225, 110 corridor. Tell me how you assess that development, and do you think it's being handled appropriately?
Well, first let's say that I get really excited and proud when I talk about job growth in my district. Let's start in Littleton. Through public and private partnerships, through infrastructure, leveraging money for infrastructure and investments, we were able to work with Sam Park developer to widen Great Road to accommodate the largest software lab in North America, Chris. The largest software lab in North America is IBM, and that's in Littleton. 2,000 employees right there in Littleton. We worked with the Littleton Board of Selectmen as well as with Sam Park to leverage to make sure that we had the necessary infrastructure to accommodate that growing workforce. Moved to Red Hat. Red Hat, we worked, it's an open software company. We worked with the federal government, with Nikki Songus' office, to get $2.7 million to, number one, to make sure we had the necessary public safety with the lights and the expansion of the roadways, but also to help them retain not only 200 jobs, but grow 100. Now, one other piece I'm really proud about is Kronos and Chelmsford. Kronos and Chelmsford, we worked with the Chelmsford delegation to leverage for mass infrastructure grant, $475,000. That was to put a new light and to make sure that there was public safety walkways available. It sounds trivial sometimes, but it allowed the largest employer in Chelmsford, 1,048 employees, to stay in Chelmsford, not move out of state, and invest $7 million.
So you're
I'm proud of that.
You're pleased
I'm
with
very
the
proud.
overall picture.
Very
Valerie?
I guess I have a different perspective on the development. The infrastructure improvements, particularly those in front of Red Hat, were mitigation monies promised to us by the developer of the entire Tech Park West. And somehow it was funded by federal dollars. So Westford residents didn't get the full value of the mitigation that they were owed for that development. But their taxes paid for it. And in order to retain Red Hat, we entered a TIP, or a tax increment financing arrangement, where the municipality is giving a tax break, property tax break to Red Hat in order to retain those 180 jobs. They're only going to be paying 50% of the taxes on the new growth for the next 12 years. So it's not just a partnership with federal and state government. We're bringing these jobs to Westford on the backs of Westford taxpayers.
Okay. You know, many years ago, there was a very highly publicized effort in Westford generated by townspeople to prevent a Walmart from coming into Westford. You probably both remember that. I certainly do. Well, you might have been
14.
10 years
Yeah.
old. Anyway, say if Walmart came to Westford today, and Valerie, I'll start with you on this one. If Walmart came to Westford today and said, we want to open us one of those super duper Walmarts on Route 110 somewhere, how do you think it would be viewed by the community, and how would you view that proposal?
Right now, development space on Route 110 is becoming more and more limited, so we would have to look at redevelopment.
Okay, don't get me wrong, not Route 110 specifically, but
Okay.
if Walmart wanted to open a place in Westford, like it did many years ago, but basically threw in the towel and said, we don't need this, and they walked away. If they did the same thing today, would you welcome Walmart or wouldn't you?
Me personally, no.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just me. We have a master plan that we're following, and we have a Route 110 master plan. And the types of businesses that we want to attract are high tech, those who will supply jobs, management style jobs, because that's the greatest growth that we need in town.
Why would you oppose Walmart on a personal level?
I guess it has to do with the area in which I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
The town had a Walmart, and part of its economic development plan was to build a new super duper Walmart on the other side of town.
And where is this?
And this was in Ohio.
Oh,
I went
okay,
back
okay,
for
yeah.
a reunion, and I just kind of went through my town. It was a proud manufacturing town. It was the home for Vidal helmets, Invicare wheelchairs, Ridge Tools. All of those businesses had moved out, and there was nothing left but retail. And that wasn't a sustainable economy at all. You could see infrastructure deterioration, and the school at that time was falling apart. So I really don't want to see that happen in Westford. I'd rather see a mix, and we seem to have enough retail space right now.
How about you, Jim, on that one?
Well, first there's a process in place for businesses, obviously, to go before the local boards, to sort of plead their case, etc. But number one, Val, I have to agree with Val on the fact that we have become.
You guys agree?
I agree on this with Val. We have become really one of the high tech meccas of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We've become sort of the 110 corridor, which I'm very proud of, and some of the work we've done here. We've become an example of the innovation economy. And I don't know if we're running out of room, to be honest with you, on 110 for a Walmart, but there's a process in place, and I'd have to defer to the local government on that.
But would you welcome a Walmart?
I think there's a process in place right now, and I think, in terms of...
Well, I understand there's a process, but would you personally...
At this point, I don't think so, no.
Okay. I'd like to move on to another topic. Jim, when you were first elected, what was your campaign mantra then? And what was your, what did you promise voters?
Well, I promised to work across the aisle, which I did. I promised that I wouldn't take the pay raise, which I did not. I promised to not take money from lobbyists and political action committees, which I didn't. I promised not to raise taxes or vote to raise taxes. I voted against the sales tax. I voted against the alcohol tax. I refused to vote for the candy tax or
the sin tax.
The sin tax. We live in a very unique area when you look at it. We're, as you know, in Lowell too, this regional economy. We're very close to the New Hampshire border. We could exacerbate the small businesses kind of economic climate and push more business over the border. So we have to be mindful of that. Number one, so I said I wouldn't do that, and I haven't. Number two, one piece that I'm very proud of that I said I would do and I worked on was something called the skills gap. And that is that there's 90 to 120,000 jobs throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that are unfilled, but people lack the necessary skills to fill them. And I actually put a piece of legislation together, a commission to look towards regionalizing community colleges and utilizing higher education facilities to identify those jobs, get the people the necessary skills. And this year in the budget and working with legislative leaders, I'm a member of the Higher Education Committee, we were able to get the legislation through. Middlesex, Chris, Middlesex is just a fine example of a real research engine for this.
Yeah,
not only here,
I'd
but
like to
this
talk
area.
about Middlesex in a minute, but in 20 seconds, do you feel you lived up to those
I
campaign
do,
promises?
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I've sided with the Republicans when I thought they had it right, and I voted against the Democrats when I thought they had it wrong.
Yeah, I've got a couple of examples here.
Please.
Valerie, how do you feel? Do you think he's lived up to his campaign promises?
Jim's 2012 voting record, he voted with the Speaker of the House about 94% of the time. And there are examples where you did indeed vote with the Republican side. They're few and far between. But on issues of transparency, you seem to side with House leadership. And bringing debate to the floor is imperative, and opening up the committee rooms to recorded minutes, etc. That's important to the people. And you are consistent in your votes against those issues. Not only that, but there have been a number of times in which there have been votes taken to allow an independent redistricting commission. And this is especially important to Chelmsford, and you're consistent in your votes against forming this independent commission going forward. And you've always sided with, keeping it kind of closed and within the legislature.
Let me respond to independent
Absolutely.
redistricting.
Go ahead. Yep, go right ahead.
I completely disagree. That was a campaign promise I made in 2008. I was the only Democrat and one of 3 in the entire state to support independent redistricting. I bucked my leadership, and in some cases, I almost got redistricted to New Hampshire. And
So just
clearly,
so
I was one of the leaders in that.
You supported the Republican effort
I supported
for an independent panel to
independent
do the
redistricting, absolutely, take the politics out of the process.
And that was
Chelmsford in 2000 was split from 1 rep to 4. I'm actually disappointed my opponent would even say that's true. I took quite a vote on that, and clearly it was a courageous vote, and I was very concerned that I could actually be chopped up and redistricted, but it was the right thing to do. The people from Chelmsford deserve to have that representation, and I'm proud I did it.
You were the only House Democrat that voted for the independent panel,
It's
correct?
absolutely true.
Okay. And what about Valerie's other comments about transparency? That on transparency issues, you vote to
Let's talk about
leadership.
transparency issues a little bit. Number one, in a Republican amendment, and Republican legislation, we voted, I think it was 156 to 0, to make sure that we had an open checkbook for state government. That means you can go to the Massachusetts website and see all the money that's been spent, all the money that's been allotted for state government. That's number one. Number two, I filed a bill myself. There's sort of a gray area right now with committee votes, with committee, the business of committees with public votes and for complying with the open meeting law. I actually filed a bill to make sure that the committee business and the committee votes comply with the open meeting law. It should be law. It shouldn't be a gray area. And so that's how I'd address that, and I've worked hard to be transparent and work with Republicans on it.
Okay. Let's just talk about a few state issues for a few minutes.
Sure.
Valerie, Jim earlier mentioned Middlesex Community College as being a real driver in the local economic climate. The governor had a proposal that I think was bits and pieces of it were approved to try to bring the oversight of community colleges under a central leadership, if you will. And tell me, do you think that was a good idea, or should community colleges like Middlesex retain their autonomy?
I like the idea of the independent community colleges retaining their autonomy, because I believe that they can address specific needs for their service area, and I believe that the deans, et cetera, can tailor programs to fill the needs that, as Jim said, there are 90,000 jobs, but there isn't anyone trained to fill it. So if they can retain their autonomy, then they can make sure that those needs are met.
Jim, you can respond to that.
Absolutely, yeah, of course.
Just talk about Middlesex.
A little bit of Middlesex. I know Middlesex had some resistance at first. Remember this, that they do retain their autonomy. What happens now is the governor is able to appoint a chair. And the appointment of a chair for the boards of trustees for the 15 community colleges, and also a non-voting member, but a member from the vocational schools to make sure that, those segments of the industries are also represented in the boards of trustees for community colleges. Those segments are together. The bill came together to keep its separate autonomy, number one, but number two, to have strategic goals to fill those jobs and those needs in the workforce.
Okay. Let's just talk about the ballot questions for a couple of minutes.
Yeah,
Jim, I'll start with you.
Please.
On the medical marijuana issue, please tell me how you stand, and our viewers, how you stand on that, and
I'm against.
And also on the assisted suicide.
I'm against on both.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say on the medical marijuana is, with mixed results we've had in California, I'm concerned about the implementation, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that there's folks with illness who deal with illness, who deal with chronic illness. I come from a medical family. My wife's studying to become a nurse. My mom's a nurse. My brother's a surgeon in the Army, and my brother-in-law is a gastroenterologist in the Army as well. So we've had lengthy discussions.
Why are you in the Army?
Yeah, it's one of those regrets, I guess, but my father was as well. But, I have real concerns about the implementation. I have concerns, with kind of reviewing sort of what happened in California when you look at, federal government having jurisdiction over some of the sort of medicinal disbursement centers, et cetera. So I don't think Massachusetts is ready for that. I'm concerned about the implementation. I'm concerned about public safety.
Okay, how about assisted suicide? You have a minute for that.
Mass Medical Society is against it. Again, we have things in place right now, something called hospice care, something called hospitalization. And also, I'm very concerned about the whole point that, determining when someone is actually going to die and to give them, assisting them towards suicide. Lots of individuals outlive their diagnosis, so I'm very concerned about that. I don't think it's a precedent we should set in Massachusetts, and it's a ballot initiative, Chris. It's not legislation. You can't manipulate it. You can't enhance it. You can't discuss
Although other
it.
legislators have tried.
Well, they've tried, but and then also there's ballot initiatives that people just don't do in the legislature, but that's another one as well. But that's where I stand. I'm no on both.
Okay. Valerie, how about you on those two
I
questions?
have to agree with Jim on this one. I'm no on both of these questions. With medical marijuana, I guess the best way to describe it is a law with flaws. And initially when you start to read through the actual text of the law, there is no age limit for prescribing the medical marijuana use for a patient. It just says the patient. And if you look at everything else in the legislature, it's 18 years old or something like that. But here, it can be prescribed for a 16-and-a-half-year-old, for a 17-year-old, and we know that there are consequences to brain development and IQ with marijuana use in youth like that. So right off the bat, no. Not only that, but let's think about what neighborhood would want a marijuana clinic, and how would we enforce the laws, and there we would put a law enforcement burden on that community. I don't think we want those around here. So I'm definitely against the medical marijuana law. Death with Dignity Act, as it's called, allows patients who are given a diagnosis that they will die within 6 months, sign a piece of paper in front of 2 witnesses that allows a physician to prescribe a lethal dose of medication. One of the 2 witnesses may be an heir. In other words, they have a direct financial interest in the outcome. So my fear is this is going to be something that leads to elder abuse. And that's certainly something that we don't want here in Massachusetts.
All right, fair enough.
Not only that, but I'm Catholic. I would never vote for death with dignity.
All right, okay. Moving on to a few other issues. I happened to drive through Westford the other day on Route 495, and I noticed that Route 495 has been repaved, and it's not quite so ruddy and bumpy. But overall, when you travel the state's highways and byways, they're in terrible condition.
Sure.
Bridges are falling apart.
Right.
The T never has enough money. The T is always looking to the legislature for a bailout. Tell me a little bit about how you think the state has handled maintaining and building new infrastructure, and how can it do that better to address those needs? It seems we're reaching a critical mass, particularly with some of the bridges, if you happen to go underneath and look up.
Certainly. Well, so it's sort of a loaded question. You want to talk about the T as well as
Sure.
road and bridge? Yeah. Well, for road and bridge, first and foremost, it's been a tough, economic situation we've been in. as I said before, some of the worst economic situations in 75 years. But in April, I believe it was May, we passed the transportation bond bill. And that is for dire need for road and bridge repair. That's number one. Number two, we worked on a transportation bond bill, which is $1.5 billion for transportation projects, and some of those have some road and bridge repair as well. But the much needed road and bridge repair, essentially, Chris, will be on the transportation. The Chapter 90. Chapter 90 money that we put out is $200 million. I'm proud that's really part of the increase we've had in local aid, like I said before, connected as well to Chapter 70 and the $4 billion overall local aid we've been able to do this last year. So I feel confident that we've been able to increase funding for local aid, but also increase funding for road and bridge repair.
Okay, what about the T? Should the taxpayers be responsible for what many believe is just chronic mismanagement?
Well, first and foremost, I've had some success with reform. When I first got elected, we had to learn to do more with less pretty quickly. I became a leader on pension reform. Some of the changes that I made as a freshman that got included in 3 phases of pension reform, some of the work that we did saved billions of dollars over 3 decades. But when you look at MBTA, number one, I'm opposed to a gas tax. I don't think we should be raising taxes in a recession. I have a strong record for not raising taxes and opposing any tax increases. I think we need to do a top-down reform and look towards savings, eliminating duplicit services that aren't being utilized. I think we need to look at salaries. I think we need to also, there's been some studies in Chicago of public and private partnerships as well. I think we should need to investigate a little bit. We need to continue that discussion because I'm opposed to a gas tax and we're going to have to find another way.
Okay, Valerie?
Would you like to start with the T?
Yeah, that's fine. And Jim raises a good point. Address the gas tax too. How do you feel about that?
I'm not in favor of raising the gas tax at this time. And I'm also a little concerned with the big bond bill that increased Chapter 90 funds to the town.
Sure.
A portion of the tax collected from the gas excise, that was earmarked to go to cities and towns for road, bridge, dam repair. And the fact that we're now borrowing money to fund that is a big concern. I mean, where's all this money going and why don't we have enough? We're collecting these taxes. It's supposed to go to the towns, but yet here we are borrowing in order to give that money to the town. So that's a huge concern right now. But I don't, I won't go along with increasing the gas tax. As far as road and the T.
Then you can go to road and bridges.
Okay, the T. We have to face some facts in that the only way to bail the T out will be through tax dollars. And so we're going to have to cut services in other areas in order to make this happen. The T's problems, whether or not you consider them chronic mismanagement or not, somebody's got to pay for it. And if you look at how the MBTA is set up, it has the necessary authorities to make changes, but why isn't this happening? Is this some leadership problem higher up? Does the legislature need to send a strong word of advice to the governor to start paying attention?
Okay. And what about road and bridge repairs and infrastructure?
It's being done slowly. We need this infrastructure repair if we're going to grow the economy. I don't know what more do you want?
What I'm looking for is, do you feel that the way the state has handled the backlog of road and bridge repairs, do you feel that it's been handled appropriately? Or as you kind of alluded to earlier, that there's money being raised, but it's not going to the purpose for which it's...
Well, that's just it. Since there's very little transparency, when you go to view the state budget, you only get an overview. So you don't get into the detail. One of the things that I understand will be happening in the future is that the state will be going to zero-based budgeting, where you start at zero and every expenditure must be justified. So I think in the future we'll be able to make sure that the funds that we're collecting, the revenues that we raise, are actually going toward the purpose for which the legislation intended them to go to. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. I'd like to just talk about party affiliations for a minute. Valerie, you're a Republican. How would you just talk about that in depth a little bit more? Are you a Tea Party Republican, or are you a Republican, sort of like a Scott Brown Republican, or a moderate Republican? How would you talk about your party affiliation?
I've been a Republican since I first registered to vote in 1976. I just missed the presidential election. And I'm a Republican because I'm generally fiscally conservative. I'm also very socially conservative. So I tend to line up that way much better than other parties. So I'm not a Tea Party Republican by any stretch of the imagination. The other thing is, I guess, it's social, fiscal. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Just
slipped away
on
from
your social side of things, are you pro-choice or pro-life?
I'm pro-life.
Okay. What about on gay marriage?
I'm Catholic, and I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman.
Okay.
For the express purpose of procreation.
All right. Jim, we sometimes talk in the office that some of your votes, particularly on, say, the independent panel, you're a Democrat, but deep down you're really a Republican. So how would you respond to that?
Well, no. First, I would say
hit on some of the issues.
First, I would say this: that I guess my father was a Republican, my mom was a Democrat. I think it's switched over the years, back and forth. I'm a blue dog Democrat. There's not a lot of them around here, but I'm about problem solving. I'm not really about partisanship as much. Remember this too. My district that I grew up in, I was raised in. I went to Westford Academy, went through the Westford school systems. My dad had a small business, insurance business in Chelmsford. My mom worked in Chelmsford. My brother and sister, we all grew up in this area. 61% or over 60% of my district is independent. And so I try to conduct myself as so, and I take issues as they come. And like I said before, I've sided with the Republicans when I thought they had it right on an issue, and I voted against the Democrats when I thought they had it wrong. And look, I was one of 3 people to vote to roll the income tax back to 5% because we owed it to the people. The people voted for it in 2000, and to circumvent democracy like that is wrong. And so I support good ideas, Chris, regardless of which party. Sometimes I feel like I fall into the category of the Democratic Party, but I support good ideas.
We talked earlier about and you guys disagreed on this, on the independent panel on redistricting.
We disagree because...
Right. Can you list a couple of other issues where you sided, where you butt the trend?
Sure. Well, independent redistricting, of course. Then you moved to the sales tax increase. That was a very difficult issue. That was an issue which I know a lot of my I was a freshman when that vote came down. A lot of my colleagues were kind of, their arms were twisted. I was up front on it. But I think one of the bigger ones was the appointment of the United States Senator. Okay. Some Democrats and Republicans thought that very much was a partisan issue. Remember in 2004 when Mitt Romney was the governor, there was some discussion about the possible vacancy if John Kerry won.
Yes.
And to change the rules, what Democrats at the time changed the rules so Romney couldn't appoint himself. What the Democrats did in 2009, which actually I think in a lot of ways propelled Scott Brown to his victory, was we changed the rules. And we appointed Paul Kirk in order to have another vote on health care. I thought it was wrong, not because of the issue at hand or the debate at hand. I thought it was wrong because we can't circumvent democracy. We can't change the rules when we think it's right to change the rules. And that's a principled vote of mine, and I got pressure from national leaders on it, but I stayed strong. And I think that people in Massachusetts are owed an election. I think we shouldn't be changing the rules, and that's just my philosophy.
All right. There's been a few scandals that have rocked Beacon Hill over the past several years. There's been 3 consecutive House speakers who have been indicted. We're still waiting for the shoe to drop on the Recreation Department and the patronage scandal there. Valerie, how would you assess the leadership in the House of Representatives and ways that things could be done better there and more openly?
Scary. The leadership in the House, it makes you wonder why anybody would even want to be a state representative.
Why do you?
That's just it. I mean, it's like walking into the lion's den if you're a person of integrity. So I don't know what we need to do other than we need to make the whole system much more transparent. Who's going in and out of the office? We should have public calendars for each of our representatives and our senators, and especially House leaders. We should keep minutes of all of our committee meetings. If you'd like to go so far as to videotape them and stream them live, that might be an improvement. But just the opening up transparency and the working. It doesn't all have to be transparent. Obviously, there are some issues that need to be discussed in a type of executive session, especially personnel matters. But other than that, opening up the system so that everybody can watch it would probably improve the situation a great deal.
So with your comments, scary, and it's like walking into a lion's den, why are you running?
We have to bring about change. Massachusetts is so much better than the reputation that the House leadership has given it. We're innovators, we're technology leaders, we're medical care leaders, and our legislators, they're just not really representative of the type of people that we are.
Okay, Jim.
Well,
What's it like working in the lion's den? Is it scary?
well, I'm not in the lion's den because of some of my votes, I'm actually in the basement, Chris. So, and I think my only staff member I have, Jeff Tucker's in the audience today. Sometimes we're very comfortable down there. Look, I can only represent my district, and I work hard, very hard to take issues as they come to support good ideas. And in terms of being independent, special interest has a big role in state government, has a big role in the way legislators vote on issues. I don't take money from political action committees. I made that promise. Anytime lobbyist money's been sent to me in political action committees, I send it away. It's just something that I think makes me a better legislator. Again, I support good ideas, and I've worked with the Republicans when I thought they had it right, and worked with the Democrats when I thought they had it wrong.
With that comment, Valerie, would you, if you were elected, would you support? Would you draft legislation and support that legislation, obviously, to put teeth in the open meeting law and the public records law? Right now, if you're an elected body in Massachusetts, and if you violate the open meeting law, my goodness, I don't even think you get a slap on the wrist, unlike some other states. Oh, no, they've been trying to change that, to put some teeth into that open meeting law. Would you take on that?
I disagree with that. There is a fine that can be levied on, say, a selectman for violation of open meeting law. I don't think that they've actually enforced it yet, but written into the law, we can be fined. So, to bring that to the state level, it's going to be expensive at first because having all of these minutes recorded, and then you have to have storage space, and you have to provide access to the public. But we did it at the municipal level. Everybody did. And we absorbed that cost and made that available to all residents. So although there would be a difficult transition, it's not impossible. And there is a fine, and we're very cautious about how we apply open meeting law at the municipal level.
Jim, what are your thoughts on that?
I filed legislation to have the business of legislative committees be open to the open meeting law and abide by the open meeting law. It wasn't successful this year.
But what happened?
It went to a study, unfortunately. But I'm going to continue to file it and continue that discussion. It's important. We've made, like I said before, we've made strides on transparency. It was a bipartisan bill that we put forward to have the money money spent available online. I'm going to continue to fight for it, and I filed legislation to do it. And a lot of my colleagues, I don't think, as you might know, Chris, haven't done that, but I have, and I think it's important.
Do you feel that there's a need for a full-time legislature in Massachusetts? Why or why not?
I do. I'm a full-time legislator myself. I've in the past assisted my dad's small business, his insurance business, but I'm a full-time legislator. I don't know many weekends that I've had off since I've been elected and sworn in 2009. Just about every weekend is full doing something. A good portion of our work, Chris, a good portion of our work is constituent services. A good portion of our work is dealing with the public. It's going to events and working with not only municipal leaders but leaders in the business community. And so our work is not, I sometimes will hear this criticism that, I read Bob Katzen's report and you guys were in for 45 minutes or 5 hours or 12 hours. Well, the majority of our work is done on constituent services, is done on informal hearings, not informal, public hearings and informal sessions. That's where a lot of the government work as well as the constituent work. And I'd say constituent work sometimes, Chris, is almost 60% of the job, maybe 70%.
Valerie?
The idea of a full-time legislature, the way it operates right now, yes, I agree, they should be full-time. But one of the ideas that I'd like to pursue is term limits, and I think that might address some of the problems in leadership. I think they're in there far too long. They establish too many relationships. And if we just simply put term limits on how long a legislator can serve, we could avoid all of those conflicts. And we can also probably do away with pensions.
So if you're elected, how many terms would you serve?
I think 3 is probably enough.
3 is enough? Okay. Are you in favor of term limits on the local level as well?
I've been asked that question before, and I didn't have a good answer because on the local level.
Well, I hope you do now.
On the local level, continuity in history is very important because we're really not very good at policy. And so you need someone that has the historic perspective. So in that regard, I like the idea that I'm serving with other selectmen who have been on the board for a very long time, because you can call up that history, which gives you, you understand why was this policy put in place, what problem did it solve, and do we need to amend it now? But in the legislature, you're dealing with law, which can be changed. So a term limit seems like a better idea.
Okay. Jim, how do you feel about term limits?
Well, I think we have term limits every 2 years. The people from the 2nd Middlesex District, the people from Chelmsford, Littleton, and Westford can fire me or hire me every 2 years. That's number one. Number two, when House leadership.
Let me just interject for 1 second.
Please.
Should there be, as Valerie suggested, a term limit? Okay. For state legislators, whether they serve 2 years, 6 years.
I'm against term limits.
Okay, that's
number one.
Yeah.
But number two, when you talk about House leadership, there is term limits for the Speaker. It's 8 years. So
or until they're retired. but let me ask you a question. Why are you against term limits?
Because I think people should decide who their leaders are. That's why. Well, my opponent said that there's no term limits on the local level, but there should be term limits on the legislative level. So, it's interesting. But nonetheless.
So, do I get the sense there that you feel that's hypocritical?
A little bit, but that's okay. This is a discussion.
Right. Valerie, how do you respond to that?
We could put term limits at the local level as well, and I would be satisfied with that. But we're going to have to change how we do business at the local level, and that's fine, no problem.
Well, how would you have to change business? How would you have to change how we do business?
Well,
if you had term limits?
Well, actually, the town of Concord does indeed have term limits for their committee appointments. You can only serve 2 consecutive terms, then you must take a break. And what that forces them into doing is truly focusing on policy and not trying to micromanage or manage any particular department. And there's a great deal of value in that, because once you have a very reasoned policy in place, then anybody can slide in and out of that position and do it well.
All right. Well, we're going to start wrapping up. I've got a few more questions. Valerie, tell me, what is the biggest difference that you see between yourself and the incumbent?
The biggest difference I see is that I'm much more responsive to my constituency. There are many examples in which Jim just simply has not responded to constituents. And it's along the lines of very, very tough issues to tackle. For example, there is a large 40B going in Middleton off Route 2A, and residents in and around the area sent a letter to both Jim and Jamie Eldridge, and they received zero response. Zero. And there was an occasion when Jim was newly elected that I called his office personally to ask for some help as a selectman, and zero response. So for me, that's one of the biggest differences I see, that I've helped my,
one more question. Yes, that goes without saying. Go ahead, just right.
So what I intend to do when I get into office is obviously work a little harder. And respond and help residents a bit more. And the other thing is I'm not afraid to tackle these very difficult issues that various constituencies have, such as 40B reform or things of that nature.
We didn't even get into 40B, but that could be a topic for another day. So thank you.
Well, just to respond to that, and I think you're referring to 15 Gray Road in Littleton. Myself and Senator Eldridge represent Littleton. We went out and met with the residents, toured the area. I have a great relationship with the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, and we've had a number of discussions with Keith Bergman on that issue. And currently that's going through a local process right now, so I completely disagree with you on that.
But that's not what the residents said, nor when I announced that I was running for election. They came to me and asked for help.
That's probably the resident who was my opponent, Paul Avella, who lives in that neighborhood, who said that.
Yeah. Paul.
Okay, well, I disagree with you on that because we've been very responsive. We have met with local officials, and Senator Eldridge and I have worked hand in hand with local officials in Littleton, so I completely disagree. What was the other point?
Well, I'll let you just stay on that for a minute. She's specifically charging that you've been AWOL on that issue. So she is playing fast and loose with the truth, or what's,
I disagree. I worked with Senator Eldridge. We toured the area. They were concerned about the density of 40B there, and currently, right now, the developer and the members of the community are working with, finding out how to deal with the density and make concessions. So I just disagree on that. That's not true. We have been responsive. I've talked to a number of residents on the phone with that. And I also disagree with the fact that you said that you called my office.
Yeah,
I remember you called my office, actually, Valerie, for a letter of recommendation. I think it was pretty responsive.
Yes, you did. That was this past spring.
Okay. There's another time that you called?
Oh, yes.
I don't recall that.
Absolutely.
I don't think that ever happened. And the majority of the members of the Board of Selectmen endorsed me, so I don't recall that happening.
I don't think that's a fair statement either.
Okay.
But no, I did call your office probably in 2009 and asked for help with an issue.
What was the issue then?
Yeah, what was the issue?
I can't remember now. That's how long it's
That's
been.
how important it was.
Jim?
I've never heard of that. And
Why would I make this?
I don't know. You can't remember what it was.
Well, then
That's my question. If you don't know what it was, then I don't understand. Because I'm very responsive. I make sure that I call everybody back mostly personally. Most emails I get, I do my best to call people back personally. So I would have to just refute what you're saying. I'm actually appalled that you would say that.
No, I do remember I spoke directly with your aide, Jeff Tucker.
I disagree, respectfully.
Okay. Well, it's 10 minutes to 6, so I'm going to give each of you 2 minutes for a closing statement for a wrap-up. Jim, I think we started with you.
Okay.
All right, so Valerie, we'll start with you. And you can take the full 2 minutes and even a little bit longer if you need to. Okay?
Well, I'd like to thank the Lowell Sun for this evening's forum. It's very important that we sit down and discuss the issues from time to time. And I'd like to thank Mr. Scott
Oh, you're welcome.
for his thought-provoking questions. Some of them were quite challenging.
Thanks.
And I'd also like to thank Jim for
I don't know if Jim
being
agrees.
here.
No, I think they're great.
Because unless we have these discussions, then it might be our only chance to influence the upcoming legislative agenda. And there's something that I have been meaning to say to Jim. You were married this past spring. Congratulations.
Thank you, Val. I appreciate
It's
that.
a long and happy marriage.
It's been a lot. It's been a lot. I mean, we got married and bought our first house in the same year, so it's been a lot. And we have a
So you're
campaign.
now-
We have a campaign too. So
You're now paying taxes,
thank you.
so you'll help.
Well, we pay
begin
taxes
to
before,
understand
so thank you.
property taxes. And to the voters of the 2nd Middlesex District, I would be honored to receive your vote on Tuesday, November 6th. For me, being a state representative is a passion. It's not a job. Because your concerns are my concerns, and these are our lives and livelihood that we're talking about. My experience as a selectman gives me a unique insight into how the legislature on legislative votes affects us here. You know, I know what works, I know what doesn't work, and most importantly, I know how it hits our bottom line. I'll bring with me some homegrown skills for effective committee work, both analytical and consensus building. I will also bring with me your plans, your needs, and your wants, because I will be your representative, just a facilitator to make sure that each community achieves its goals. It should never be the other way around. My vision for the district is to restore an active partnership between all the hundreds of municipal volunteers and the State House. It shouldn't be unusual for office hours or a periodic newsletter, nor should it ever be considered extraordinary for a state representative to attend a municipal meeting as an active participant or as simply as an observer. My vision for Massachusetts is that, you know, this state has so much to offer, and what we have is legislation that's antiquated. It doesn't help move us along. It doesn't help us increase business. We are innovators when it comes to technology and also to medicine. We need to be legislative innovators as well. So I'm asking for your support on Tuesday, November 6th. I can't do it without you, and going forward, we will be partners in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. Good luck. Jim?
I just want to thank the Little Sun for having this spirited discussion. I want to thank my opponent, Selectman Wormell, for the spirited discussion as well. I want to thank Chris Scott as our moderator. I really appreciate you putting this together. I come to this job with a lot of humility. I understand that, every 2 years you can hire and fire me. I understand that the people from the 2nd Middlesex District, the people of Chelmsford, Littleton, and Westford are my bosses. I've come to this job really working across the aisle. I care very deeply about issues. I care very deeply at the fact that if it's a good idea, it's a good idea. I've sided with the Republicans when I thought they had it right and voted against the Democrats when I thought they had it wrong. I've worked hard to increase local aid in this last legislative session, and we've found successes in that. We're not where we are, where we want to be yet, but we're moving in the right direction. I continue to be very proud of the work, the public and private relationships we've worked together with to create jobs in this district. Over 1,000 jobs that we've created, and thousands and thousands of jobs that we've retained in Chelmsford, Littleton, and Westford. I'm very proud of that. I'm also proud of the way I've handled myself on issues in terms of being independent when it comes to voting against a sales tax increase in a recession, or voting against an alcohol tax increase in a recession, voting against appointing a United States Senator, or voting against a redistricting plan that put politics first and people in Chelmsford last. But I'm also very proud of my record on reform and doing more with less. I became a leader on pension reform. Was one of the only freshmen to have multiple bills that I filed put into the 3 phases of pension reform to save billions of dollars over the next 3 decades. I worked across the aisle on EBT reform, worked across the aisle on Melissa's law, worked across across the aisle on public safety issues such as putting level 2 sex offenders online and found successes. I really want to work hard across the aisle. I want to continue these partnerships with public and private individuals to create jobs and retain jobs in the Commonwealth. I'm very proud of the work we've done, and I'm going to continue to work hard to make you proud. I ask for your vote on November 6th, and thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks,
Good
Chris.
luck in the election.
Thank you. Thanks, Pat.
I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, and I hope you can rejoin us on Monday night when I will moderate another debate between Drake State Rep Colleen Gary, who's seeking re-election to, boy, it's going to be about her 11th or 12th term, and her Republican challenger from Drake, Kathy Richardson, who is a member of that town's Board of Selectmen. So thanks for tuning in, folks, and we'll see you on Monday night. Good? That's a wrap.
Nice job.